and is available to review on the H&H website usually within a couple days after the class has occurred. We re-edit it just a little bit and then repost that so that you guys can review that at a later date. Okay, as we're going through today's class, we're going to be in what's called a screen sharing mode so that you can see my computer. And once again, my name is Bentley. I'm your host and teacher today. So when we're in that screen sharing mode, you're going to see a little drop-down menu show up in the top center of your screen. If you click on that, you'll see a little chat bubble or talk icon, and you can click on that and type in a little bit a message if you've got a question or want me to repeat something or clarify a little bit better. You can also, you should see a raise your hand icon down near the bottom part of the page. Look for that. You'll see that through that same drop-down menu when we're in the screen sharing mode. So you can use either one of those two tools to communicate with me during the class, and I will pause probably about halfway through and just check for questions, and then also at the end hang out in the room for a little longer to clarify any further questions. Okay, I'm going to jump into the screen sharing mode and just take me a second to get a couple things set up. And we will get going. Okay, just to clarify, and so everybody kind of knows where we're going with today's class, as looking at Adobe Camera Raw and looking at workflow for it, we're going to spend a good portion of today, in fact all of today's class, just looking at Adobe Bridge and what we can do in Adobe Bridge. And the reason I do that is if you don't understand Bridge and you're using Adobe Camera Raw through either Bridge or Photoshop, you're really losing a lot of the functionality and the efficiency that you can gain through that. Just a quick show of hands, if you guys will let me know, how many people are shooting and capturing RAW right now? If you guys will just raise your hands down there at with that little on the attendance box. So Rachel is, so I'm hoping that means everybody else is shooting JPEG, or, okay, there's Janelle is as well. Perfect, and once you raise your hand, you can just click on that and it'll lower your hand again. So does that mean everyone else, I'm going to assume, is shooting JPEG or going through some other RAW processor? I'm also going to let you know that we also teach a class on Adobe Lightroom, and there's similarities between those two. And I'm not going to tell you that one's better than the other. They're just different. And that's something that if you want to get into a one-on-one discussion why I would recommend one over the other, please drop me an email or give me a call here at the lab and we can go through that in more detail. Okay, so like I said, we're going to spend a lot of time in Adobe Bridge today just kind of getting a feel for how you can set it up. And right now, this is set up in a view that is kind of like the default view for Adobe Bridge when you open it up. So I'm going to go ahead and make that go full screen so we can see just a little bit more information on it. And I know I've been using Photoshop for quite a while, and I remember when Bridge first came out, and I looked at this, and I looked at all the different things that were on my screen. I'm like, I don't even know where to begin, where to look. And so that's one of the things that I go over first is, let's talk about how to make Bridge show you what you need it to show you, what is important for you to see. So, for example, right now I'm looking at all this, and I've got these little tiny thumbnails or the content here in the middle. Can't make out a whole lot on them. I kind of get an idea that this is a senior shoot, and she's probably a girl. I'm hoping so because of the fuchsia colored dress in there. And I can see that there's maybe some favorites over here, but I'm not really sure where those would take me. I see some tabs hidden underneath that take me to other things like keywords or metadata. Over here on the right side, if I come to the left side, I've got filters and collections and something called an export, and then I can also come to folders. So what I like to do is start changing these around so that it makes sense for me to use, and I get the information I need. So one of the things that I find is I very rarely use this preview window or the metadata window when I'm doing my daily work. Now, I do use those windows on certain occasions to look up specific information, but it's not something that I need to see on every single file when I'm going through my workflow, especially if I'm doing raw. So to get rid of a tab, there's a couple ways I can do it. I can right-click on that tab and choose to close that preview window, or I can bring up other windows. So I'm going to go ahead and close preview. And when I do that, it changes our metadata and our keyword panel just to take up that whole right side there. So I also am not going to be too concerned about metadata, so I'm going to close that one as well. I may be using keywords, but I may not. So either I can close that. The other thing that I can do is take a panel, grab it, and you see it gets that blue line around it. That lets me move it to different locations on the screen. You'll see, for example, right now over here on the left side, it's creating a blue box on the panel over there on the left. That means it's going to add it into that group. If I drag up just a little bit higher, I get a blue line, which means it's going to add it as a new panel over there. So that's what I'm going to do first, is just add it as a new panel so you can see kind of what that does. So now I have keywords in their own panel over here on the left side, and everything on the right side now is blank. To fill that up, you'll see that there is vertical divider lines on the left and right side of the page. I can just take and drag those all the way out to fill the page with whatever I want, make it smaller again so I can reconfigure that. And really what I'm going to do is I am going to talk about favorites and folders. We're going to talk briefly about collections and export near the end, but for right now I'm going to close both of those. And I'm going to bring my keyword panel down here with my filter panel because I may be using those together. As a matter of fact, just to show you how easy it is to add a panel once it's been removed, I can just right-click and I'm going to bring in, for example, my metadata panel right now so I could see that with keywords and filtering right there at the bottom. So that gives me a way that I can organize the panels where it makes sense for me. And we use the filtering quite a bit. We're going to go through the favorites and the folders quite a bit as well. Now, there's some other things that I'm going to show you that we can do. Down here at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a little slider. If I move that to the left or right, that changes the size of the thumbnails I see in my content panel. So obviously, as I go to the right, they get larger. As I go to the left, they're going to get smaller. So I'm going to set those to a size that is nice, where I can see a good selection of images, but not so big that I can't tell. Like in this example, I want to see the images that were shot in a similar scenario or a similar scene. I want to see those in a group. So I'm going to kind of let me see that there. So if I made them really big, it'd be harder to go through and filter and search for things. If I make them too small, it's hard to read all the file names and really get a good look at each image. In addition, you can see I can set it to some in-between sizes where I can't see a complete row of images. So as I scroll through this, I'm always seeing partial images coming through there. So one of the things that you can do down here again in the bottom right, you see I have view content as thumbnails, but there's an icon just to the left of that that says view thumbnails or click to lock thumbnails to grid. When I select that, that makes it so as I scroll, I'm going to always see a complete line based on the magnification view. It's not going to show me a partial view as I come in there. So as I enlarge or reduce my sizes, it's always going to stick to a full image on that grid. And that's kind of what I prefer. I like that look. I also have some other different views down here. I can see what are called content as details. which shows me a large thumbnail or a thumbnail here on the left, and it gives me a lot of EXIF data here on the right of it. I also can go into what they call a list view that gives me all sorts of tabs and columns. Honestly, I don't know that I've ever worked in this view. It's just something that's there. I just typically stay in this view right here. Now, let's jump up near the top of the screen. Coming across the top, there's some navigation icons here to jump back and forth between folders. I also have a navigation path bar where I can jump into my web classes. I can go to different folders on my hard drive. Now, by picking the back arrow, it takes me back to the folders that I just navigated out of. So it kind of remembers where you were and takes you forward and back through that. So that's handy to know how those two work. I also have a drop-down arrow that will take me to specific locations if I want to jump and navigate a little bit quicker. I very rarely use these two icons. Reveal, this shows me the recent files or lets me jump to Photoshop. Also, that will jump me back into Photoshop, kind of a boomerang type of thing. Adobe Bridge does have a downloader for your camera that you can use. It's not something that I use in my workflow, and I've had mixed results, and I talk to different people and get mixed stories, whether they like using it or they don't like using it. One of the things that I heard from somebody was it doesn't give me good information if a file doesn't download. It runs through it, but I don't know if there's any issues in downloading. So they like having a manual workflow to go through and download their images. But it's there if you want to use it. It lets you go and browse to specific files. If you have a camera or a compact flash card, it tells you where you want to download those to. If you want to rename them, you can set it to download to a second folder if you want to. So there's all sorts of things that you can do with this. And it's not a bad tool. It's just not something that I use in my workflow. Also, I would caution you, if you're using Easy Event going into our event software with a data wand, I probably wouldn't use that downloader because it may change the date captured stamp, and that can cause some problems linking up data later on, so be cautious with that. There are review modes that we can go into, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. And there's also an export mode. If you're a longtime user of Photoshop and had CS4, CS3, or older, you remember in Photoshop there was a create contact sheet in your scripts actions to create contact sheets. Well, that went away with CS5. Actually, it's not automatically installed, and there are some ways that you can install that. Check out a blog post on our website that I give you the instructions where to go find the files to reinstall that. Instead, they've created a contact sheet generator here in Adobe Bridge, and it has some different functionality, and it's not a bad tool. There are times that I use it over the old plugin and vice versa. It just depends on what I need. So that kind of goes through these basic tools here on the left. On the right, these that come out right now, which actually I can either make smaller or larger, are different presets for different views. As I click through them, I can see different ways to preview my stuff. For example, output is going to bring up that PDF creator. I can view in a keyword situation. I can go in and do a certain preview, so when I click on an image, I get a large preview over here. There's a light table mode, which lets me just see all my thumbnails. I can go into a folder view, which lets me see my folders over here on the left side. And so I can go and look through different views. Now, one of the things that I like to do is once I get my layout set the way I want to view it, click on that down arrow and save that as a new workspace. So if those preset workspaces, if one of those isn't really what you're looking for, you can define your own workspace. And that gets saved as a preset up there. If you're working in your workspace and you start dragging some stuff out and rearrange it, so let's say I do something like this, and I click on my workspace and that's not the way I had it set up, that's not what I need to do, all I need to do is right-click and just say Reset, and it will take me back to how I defined or saved that workspace. So keep that in mind. As you're defining these, if you move stuff around and then you can't seem to get it back the way you want it to, just right-click and choose Reset, and it will take you back to the way you configured that originally. Now, down below that, we have some little icons. One has a grid with boxes that are big boxes, and the second, if you look at it real close, is a grid with small boxes. And this defines how you see your previews. When it's set to the left of the two boxes, it's going through, and unless you browse really quickly, when you go into a folder, you can see the previews very quickly, but it's using what's called the embedded JPEG in your RAW file. And so it's using the camera RAW, or the file from camera RAW, or the JPEG embedded in it, and it may not be a really sharp image. If I brought that up full screen, it's going to take a second or two to render it out to be sharper. There are another disadvantage for this is if I go in and change this RAW file, those updates aren't visible when I'm in this fast view, and we'll demonstrate that next week. There's also a high quality view, which when you select it and go to always high quality, it's going to take a little longer when I go into a folder for it to render the images out, but I'm always going to see the most accurate view of my image. So that's something that, honestly, I kind of alternate back and forth depending on what I'm doing in my workflow. And if I'm just needing to look at images really quickly to know what's in a folder, I'll go with that, preferring the embedded image. If I'm working on them and need to see high quality, I'm going to go to that high quality view over there on the right. Okay, our next option is we can do different types of filtering, and I actually use all these options on my filter pad, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. We also have sort options. I can sort by a file name, which is the view we're seeing now. I could do by date created or date modified, which in this case is all going to be the same. I can also come in and select an image and drag it into a different order. So for example, I'm going to make my thumbnail smaller real quick. I could take a range of images, say I want these at the beginning of the session, and just drag and drop them into a new order. This is a great tool to know about if you're working with, for example, a wedding or a large event where you may have shot with multiple cameras, or you want the images to be in a specific sequence to tell the story that you're trying to show with your images. So you can just grab images, drag and drop them into different spots, and see them that way in Adobe Bridge. Now keep in mind, if I go and view these files in Windows Explorer or in my Finder on a Mac, they're still not going to stay in this order, so I have to do some additional steps to make them stay there. So, for example, if I wanted to do that, how could I do it? Well, we're going to jump kind of ahead on my notes here, and let's talk about file renaming. So let's go back, and I'm going to sort these by the file name to get them back in the original order. And I'm just going to grab a first section of these files. And if I come up under Tools, I'll see there's a Batch Rename option. When I bring that Batch Rename option down, it's going to open up, and it probably will look something like this, which is a default preset. You can save renaming presets if you use specific ones over and over. So I'm going to kind of clear this one out and take it back to a real base level. To do that, where it says New File Names here, I'm just going to hit minus on several of those options. And we'll just erase out that name. So I can see right now, as an example, all my files are being named by the customer's name. There's a high school code in this case, and then a sequential number. So I want to rename these. So I'm going to come in under Text, and I'm going to rename this. I'm just going to name it her name. Now, if I did that, all the files are going to have the same name, so I need to add something unique to that. So I'm going to add a dash to that, press the plus sign here, brings up a new or a new area and come down and choose a sequential number. That's going to add a sequential number after that file name, and it's going to start with a 1. I can tell it to start with whatever number I want, for example 100, I could say 52, whatever I wanted, but I'm going to start with 1, and I'm going to zero pad it with 3 zeros. There's another option here where it says preserve current file name in XMP metadata. And the XMP metadata is basically the information about our image. It's going to have things like our shutter speed, our f-stop. If we save keywords, those would be saved in there. But I'm going to, for this example, I'm going to save this original file name in there, which is her last name, first name, high school. I'm going to press rename, and it's going to rename those first 15 images with her first name and sequential 1 through 15. I'm going to show you now by renaming the second group of images, 16 through 39, and I'm just going to use the shortcut key to open up the rename, which is Command-Shift-R or Control-Shift-R on a PC. And I want to show you that it remembered that the last name that it used was 15, so it's going to start this one on 16. So it's going to remember that sequence number excuse me, as you go through. So I'll rename those as well. Okay, now I'm going to go back a step and say I've messed up on how I've renamed these. I can fix this very easily since I chose to use this preserve current file name in XMP metadata. If I come to the metadata tab over here and just select a single image, right here on the under file properties, I'm going to close the rest of this so we don't, it's a little easier so you know where to look. Where it says preserved file name, that remembers the original file name that I used when I renamed it. So if I grab all of those files and again go into my batch rename, Command-Shift-R or Control-Shift-R, I can change this file name option and come in and choose metadata. And under metadata, I'm going to choose, oops, not metadata, it is preserved file name. And that's going to take and add back to that preserved file name that was stored in the metadata and rename these back to the way that they were before. So in other applications, when you're batch renaming, there really wasn't a, quote, undo. There is an undo in Adobe Camera Raw, or in Adobe Bridge, I'm sorry, when you're batch renaming, as long as you check or choose that option, preserve current file name in XMP metadata. So that will save that in there. Okay? So keep that in mind. It's a great tool to use. I use the batch renaming all the time. There are a lot more things that you can do in the batch renaming, and one of the things that they added in CS5 is this option called string substitution. What this lets you do is correct spelling or take out specific things. So for example, if I wanted to change this renaming option so it was only the last name of high school and the sequential number, it would be, it's kind of difficult to take out her first name out of there and keep all the rest of the stuff intact without going through and renaming them one at a time. So what this lets us do by using string substitution, I can come in and say, look for specific text. And typing in that text, I can replace it with nothing, so you can see the example down here below. It's taking out her first name, or I could replace that with just an M, or I could say, actually, that was Bonnie. So I could do a lot of different things using that string substitution. So it's another powerful feature in the batch renaming. Okay, I want to jump into the preferences real quick and talk about some of the things in there that are worth knowing and good to set up. So on a PC, you're going to go up under Edit to Preferences. On Mac, you're going to go under Adobe Bridge CS5 and come to Preferences. So the first thing that we can bring up is our General, which gives us our appearance. We have an interface brightness, which changes the color or the tone around our image. We also have an image background brightness. It can go from black to white. Now let's talk about what that is going to do to our image. It's actually not changing our image, but if we go to black, anytime you go to a darker background, it's going to make your image pop off more. It's going to be stronger, and it's going to make your image appear that it has more contrast in it. If we take it to white, it's going to flatten out our image, make it appear like it has less contrast. And if we go to gray, or right in the middle, that's going to give us the most accurate representation. So this is good to know for two reasons. If I'm actually trying to correct files and view and know what those files are going to look like and print like, if I set it to black and they look like they have a lot of contrast to them, I may think, oh, let me tone that down so they're not so contrasty. Or I may think, oh, I like how that looks, and they come back and they look flatter. That can be influenced by where you set that backdrop tone to. Same thing if we go to white and our images look flat and we add a lot more contrast to it, it may end up being too light or they may be too contrasty. So when we're doing image correction, it's best to have that at the neutral or middle gray. I actually like setting my edges just a little bit darker to help me on where I'm focusing. You'll notice as you go back and forth on that, the text will automatically pop to either black or white as you change that opacity down. On mine, in the preferences, I do turn off the Launch Adobe Photo Downloader. We talked about that. Double-click Edit the Camera Raw setting in Bridge. When we're talking about Adobe Camera Raw, we need to keep in mind Adobe Camera Raw is actually a plug-in, and that plug-in can be run in Adobe Bridge or in Adobe Photoshop. In actuality, the same plug-in or a very, very similar version of it is what runs Lightroom. So if we turn that off, whenever we select an image and open it or double-click it to open in Camera Raw, it's going to host that image inside of Photoshop. So my computer has to open up Photoshop, open up the Raw plugin, and bring the image in. Because it's running through Photoshop, I don't have as many resources available. It's taking up more and more of my computer memory, hard drive space, all that type of stuff. So it's not going to be as efficient. I'm also limited to how many images I can open at a time by running it through Photoshop. So I always host my Adobe Camera Raw plugin within Bridge. I have a command option, and that opens it up into a loop view, which we'll talk about that. On my favorites, which we haven't talked about the favorite tab yet, I'm starting off just by showing my computer, my desktop, and my pictures folder, and those are some defaults. I could also go to my documents folder or to a user folder if I wanted to. On thumbnails, which is the next option down, what I like to use here is the amount of metadata that I see underneath each thumbnail. So right now, I can see the date created, and I can see exposure information. I can change those, so if I wanted to see, for example, a document type to know it was a Camera Raw, or if it was a JPEG or a TIFF, I could do that. I could come in and choose color profile to know what color profile I was working in. I can see size information. So there's all sorts of things that I can show there. I can also turn both of those off if I just want to see the file name. So that's something just to be aware of if you want to see some of that information, how you can turn that on and off very easily. Show Tooltips will give me tooltips as I hover over different things in Bridge, and that's a good thing to have on when you're first learning it. If they annoy you, just uncheck that. The next one I want to jump down to is our labels. And We'll talk about labels a little later on in today's class, but there are different ways of ranking your images. What I do want to point out here is I can come in and change these names from red, yellow, green, blue, or purple to different things. Like I might want to say red actually means black and white conversion, meaning I want to, if I flag an image red, I need to convert it to black and white. So I can change those names however I want. Keep in mind, if you've changed these names of the labels, and you take that image to another computer that doesn't have the same name in that label, so for example, I'll show you exactly how this works. So I'm going to name that black and white conversion, say OK, and I'm just going to flag an image with that red label. So you see it says red on it now. If I took that file to another computer that didn't have that label named black and white conversion, that label is going to show up white. And so it just kind of lets me know that something isn't quite right on it. Now to tag a label on and off, so I did that very quickly by just pressing Control or Command 6. If I press Control Command 6 a second time, it turns it on or off. I can also use labels from this top menu and come down and say black and white conversion. So our labels, we'll go back into that preference, are for our color. So I'm going to change that one back to red for right now. Just say OK. Now, it's still showing me white because I changed the name of that. So if I tag it off, you notice I had to cycle through that tagging 3 times to make it go back off, and now it's going to automatically show up as red. I use the labels with rankings 1 through 5 on my star ratings and the colors to help indicate things. I can use it to say these are images I want to keep, these are images I want to delete, these are images that I want a specific type of treatment done to for running actions and for filtering, and we'll go through that. So for example, let's go into a preview mode. So I'm going to come up under View and go to a full screen preview, which I can do by just pressing my space bar, and that opens up the image full screen. If I bring my cursor and click on it, it's going to load it up to 100%. You'll see it'll take just a second, and then it renders in so that we can see it real sharp. I can use my arrow keys to navigate through those images and look at them in a full screen preview mode. Now when I'm looking at these, I can press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to add a star ranking, and you see that shows up down here at the bottom. Or if I press 0, it takes all the stars off. I can also press 6, 7, 8, and 9 to add the different color ratings on it. So I can use this as a nice way to do a quick presentation with a customer to pick the images that they really like, and I can do that just using however I want to do it. In this case, I can do 1-star rankings. Okay? I also, under View, can come in and do a slideshow mode. If I press H, that will bring down my help options where I can see different options. I can rotate the images. I can make the images go quicker, go slower. I have some slideshow options. I'll press that, which is the L key. So I can black out additional monitors. So if I have 2 monitors, I can make it go black. I can make it repeat. Zoom back and forth gives me just a little bit of like I can't remember the filter technique that it's called as I go through. I can show how quickly I want those images to move through. If I want some just basic dissolves going in there, I can do that. So I press OK. And we'll see it's just going to kind of play through some of the images. Take that zoom off, and I can turn captioning on, and that's going to show me different information. So compact shows me the file name down here at the bottom. If I go to full, it's going to give me a larger view, which shows some of the metadata if I have that turned on. Or I can go to page numbers, which just kind of shows me the image number that I'm looking at, or if I'm looking at PDFs or something like that. So there's the quick slideshow view for you. The space bar pauses, and the escape key will take you back out of that. So again, that's under View. You've got the slideshow. We also have a review mode in CS5, which is really cool. Let's start with one of the beginning images. And press Control-B, Command-D, B as in boy, or to review mode. And this lets us see the images where we can see before and afters. So this is another good comparison way where you can come through and say, what images do we want to keep? And you can see, okay, what did I just shoot right before or after it? So for example, I don't want to keep this image, so I'm just going to press the down arrow, and that takes it out of my selection. And then I can compare the next two images, and actually, because I can see now, I've got the similar pose with no smile, a slight or soft smile, and a big smile. I'm going to decide which ones I want to show, and just use the down arrow key to deselect it. So I can rotate through these very quickly and see images to keep and to delete out. So just rotate through there. Now, when I exit out of this or escape out of this, you'll see the files that I kept are still selected. They have that gold color around them. The files that I didn't keep are unselected. So now I can use my labels or my ratings to say, these are the files that I want to keep. So I just press Control-6 or Command-6 to rank the files that I wanted to keep. I'm doing this as opposed to deleting because, A, it's a little faster. I still need to keep all these gray cards in my file because I haven't done my color corrections yet. And for example, on a group shot, I may want to go back and use one of the images that wasn't one of the best images for a possible head swap or something like that. I'm going to clear all of our metadata tags right now by just pressing Control-A or Command-A. Press Command-0 to take off the stars, and then I'm going to tag all the colors off by just pressing Command or Control-6 twice to clear all of that. Okay. There are some additional preferences under Camera Raw preferences, and we'll talk about those a little bit more when we are working in the second part of this class dealing with raw files. Okay, so I'm going to take a real quick break and just see if anybody has any questions. You can type anything into the chat box. Just click, and actually I'm going to jump out of screen sharing for just a moment, so that way it's a little bit easier for you to see. So if you have a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand or type something into the chat dialog, and I'm going to resume again in just one quick moment. Okay, I'm guessing everybody is doing okay since we didn't see any questions pop up so far. So we'll go ahead and continue. So let's go back and talk just a little bit more about the filtering. We touched on that. We talked about how to add the filtering by using command keys or control keys to add the star rankings. So I'm just going to go through and add some different stars on some images here and some different color rankings. And what I want to show you here is I can do a combination of stars. I can do a combination of solid color, give it a color, or a color and a star. So now let's look at our filter panel over here on the left side. As I've gone through and added those rankings, I can see now under filter, I can see I have 2 images that are red, 2 that are yellow, 2 that are green, 2 that are blue. I also have 108 images that have no rating and 3 1-star, 3 2-star, 3 3-star, and 1 4-star image. Now, to see those specifically, I can just click on any one of the options, and it will make that option visible. So in this case, I'm seeing 1 star. If I want to see blue, I can see now here's blue with 4 stars. So I can combine those to see and filter to specific things. So here's all my red, or all my 1 stars. Here's all the 1 stars with a red rating. How about 1 stars with a yellow rating? Well, I don't have any of those, but I can see how many yellow stars or yellow ratings I have. So I can use that filter to come in and look at specific things and filter my images down to those specific groups. That's really nice, for example, if I know that everything I've tagged as 1 star means I want to convert it to black and white. I can run a batch action on that, or I can convert it through Adobe Camera Raw. Maybe red stars means that this is an image that I need to spend some extra time retouching, or there's something I need to fix in the image. So using those labels and ratings are great ways to add to your workflow to help you get to specific images easier. I have a customer that I worked with up in Northeast Ohio that the photographer did all the editing, but then she had an assistant that went through and did all the Photoshop work for her. So she'd come into Adobe Bridge and use the stars and the colors and the combinations to say, this is an image that I want retouched this way. This is say I want a glamour retouch on this image. This is an image that I want converted to black and white. This is an image that I want a vignette on. And then use the combinations of the stars and the colors to indicate what, or to communicate what she wanted to have done. Then the artist or retoucher would come in and use the filtering panels to say, this is what I want to run a batch action on these. Now with CS5, there's some other ways that I could do that, and I can do that by using what's called the collections panel. And I can make 2 different types of collections. I can either make just an active new collection, or I can make a smart collection. Now, if you're familiar with iTunes, you should be familiar with smart collections. A smart collection basically is a group of images or a group of a collection of data that meets specific criteria. So in this case, I can say, where do I want it to look? I could say either in this specific clients folder, or I particularly, since I use these for a lot of different things, say use in the current folder. And I can sort for all sorts of things, keywords, labels, ratings, all sorts of things. So I can say, and start by saying, find a label that contains, and our labels are named red by the color. So I can say, save. And now I have a new smart collection that meets the criteria. If it has a red label, it's going to grab those images out of that folder. If I change that collection and edit it and say, show me the label contains red, plus show me that the rating equals 1 star, and press save, that's showing me everything that's 1 star or red, and that's because of the way I set the criteria. It has to meet if any criteria are met. If I change that to all criteria are met, I should only see one image that's red and has 1 star on it, just like that. So using those collections is a handy way to filter down. And so for this customer, we went through and built collections for each of the retouching options. So all they had to do was come into this collection, press red, and they had the images to do whatever option that they wanted. They knew how to pull those together very cleanly. So we're going to go ahead and just delete that collection because we're not going to use that, and go back into the folder where we were. So that's one way to use the filtering and the labels. We can also add keywords, and the keywords may be the client's name, it may be a specific location. The keywords section, really, I think we could spend a whole class on just keywords and how to use them. And if that's something that you're interested in, drop me an email or respond in the comments if you'd like to learn more about keywords, and that's something we can consider for an additional class. Okay, Also in the filtering, and I'm going to go into another folder here and look at one. This is actually a wedding folder. On this one, we can see some more information by coming in and looking at the filtering. For example, we can see all the images that are landscape orientation or portrait, which is really handy if you're needing to run specific types of actions to filter for either landscape or portrait. We can see the ISO ratings that these images were captured with, which is really handy if you know that you need to apply additional noise reduction on those high ISO images. You can select those just by the ISO rating over here. We can look at exposure times. If we're interested in that, we could see when I did a fast shutter speed or a medium or a slow shutter speed. That's handy if I need to evaluate things if my camera's working well. I can also see what apertures I tend to shoot, and I can see the focal lengths that I tend to choose. So, for example, I can see the ones that I've done with wide angle. And again, I could use that to fix specific things. For example, if I want to take out some of the barrel distortion in the image, by sorting by focal length, that makes that easy to use. I can also come down here and filter. I'm going to close some of these that we've already looked at. I can filter by the type of lens that I used, again, to see if I have characteristics, that if I have problems with certain lenses. For example, on the Nikon, the 70 to 200 millimeter 2.8 lens tends to show a little bit of lens vignetting at certain focal lengths. So I might be able to sort for that lens and then sort for those focal length range to show me the images that I may need to do additional work on. Okay? So again, something by just using that filtering option. The third thing here, or another thing, I can filter by serial number, which is pulling the metadata serial number of my camera. That can be really handy. So if I see that I have a bunch of images that have camera dirt on them, I can identify which camera that is from by the serial number. I can also identify, for example, if I have my second shooter and I want all of their images to be black and white, I can sort by a specific serial number to do those, to convert that to black and white if I want to. So there's a lot of good information and a lot of ways to use those filter tabs to help work through your images as well. Okay, some other ways that I use, we didn't really talk about the favorites, so let's go into that real quick. And I'm just going to drag out my folder tab for just a second. And we were looking in this Roberts folder. So for this example, I always go into this Adobe Camera Raw class to work out of, because I have a lot of images in there. So I can just right-click on that and choose Add to Favorites. So that now shows up over here in my Favorites column. I can also say, let's go to my desktop. And I'm going to just drag that folder back. So now I'm viewing my desktop. So as I go through my favorites, I can go to specific locations and get there very quickly by just pressing any of those shortcuts that I've saved to navigate. You can also remove those just as easy by just, again, right-clicking on it and just say Remove from Favorites. Something else that I use all the time, when I select an image and I want to actually know where that's saved on my computer, yeah, I could come over here to the folders and navigate, but if I just right-click, and on a Mac, it's going to give me the option Reveal in Finder. On a PC, I think the verbiage is Show in Explorer or Reveal in Explorer. When I click that or select that, it actually opens up my Windows Explorer or my Finder window and highlights that specific file for me. So if I needed to get to that specific file for a reason, that's a real quick and dirty way to do that. So again, you can also do that over here on the Folders tab or the Favorites tab by just right-clicking and again, Reveal, and it's going to take you to a window with that specific location on it. Now, something else that I do frequently is if I want to rearrange or organize a folder of images, I can use Bridge to do that as well. So I'm going to start just by right-clicking and saying create a new folder, and I'm going to name that folder, and I'm going to call it edited. Go back into my original folder, and now if I come up here to the beginning of the list, if I just drag and drop an image into that edited folder, it moved it in there. So we can see that it's in there now. If I hold down the Option key and do that, it copies it. Now to show you how this works, this is a second trick that I do quite a bit, is in Bridge, I'll open up a new window, and let me arrange these so you can kind of see what's going on here. So now I have opened up Adobe Bridge twice looking at the same folder. So you can see if I come back on the left side, here's my Roberts main folder, and on the left side, and on the right side is the edited folder. So again, I'm just going to drag and drop. Oops, I've already got that one. Just drag and drop. It moved it over there. If I hold down the Option key, it's going to copy it. So we can see this image and this image still exist over here where the other two got moved. So I'll use this quite a bit if I'm editing, if I'm needing to clean stuff up, if I want to compare two folders of images. I can come in and open up multiple windows in Bridge at one time to compare what's in there and move things back and forth between them if I want to. So it's a real nice way to do that type of sorting. Okay, one more thing and we'll be done with today's class, and this is also a new feature in CS5, which is a new panel called Var Export Panel. So I'm actually going to bring that in kind of as its own, set that up there at the top. And to minimize a panel, just double-click on the header and that minimizes it. So what this export panel, it comes in with 4 different options pre-programmed. I have exports to Facebook, to Flickr, to Photoshop, or Photoshop.com, and to save to a hard drive. So the way this works is I can take an image and just drag and drop, and it adds it to that Facebook export. So you can see it's listed in right there. So I'm just going to take a couple images and put them in. And then when I press this Export Facebook Job, it's going to open up and it says, hey, wait, I recognize you, you're Bentley Ski. I can add these to a specific photo album. I'm going to call this Web Class Delete because I don't want to leave this up there. I can set privacy options on that, so I'm going to set that to only friends. I can enter in locations and descriptions on that. So that's going to go into that photo album that will show up down here, Web Class Delete. I can specify image options, like if I want to resize that. So I'm going to set this fairly small since it's going to Facebook. I can set the image quality, so it's a pretty compressed JPEG. I'm going to always render from that full-size image so that it's going to pull any metadata that I have processing and give me the best quality. And I can also append any copyright metadata information if I want to. And I'll add keywords, and then I can save that as a preset. So I'm going to call this Facebook Weddings. And just press Save. So now I have, you see, a Facebook Wedding preset, so I don't have to do all of this stuff again, and choose Export. So this is going to start publishing these to my Facebook page. Now this is actually taking the raw file, doing the processing, and then uploading that as a small image. So let's see how this works. So we're going to go to my Facebook page, log in, and now if I come into my photos, oops, not there. We'll refresh that just a second. It should show up. Okay, those are uploaded. Go to My Profile, and we can see those images that I just uploaded from Bridge are now showing up in Facebook. So I can get those in there real quick and easy. So that's one way I can do things like that. I'm going to go ahead and delete that post. Oops, right there. That way they're not on there any longer. Clear that list. So I have a Facebook export now. I can make additional exports down here at my preset. Let's say that I want to add a new preset. Let's say that I export to go to Animoto, and I know that, oops, cancel. I'm going to start by choosing my Save to Hard Drive option, press the plus. I can specify where I want these to output to. So I'm going to say in the original location, but in a subfolder called Animoto. Again, set up image options. I can do resizing. I can set image quality just like we did before. And now I have a preset that I could have named that Animoto and just drag and drop images into it, and then it will export those following the criteria that I've specified. So using that export panel is a really quick, easy way to take images and send them to specific websites or get specific effects applied to them over and over and over. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's class on going through Bridge. There are a ton more things that Bridge can do. We've touched on the main things that we're going to use when we talk about Adobe Camera Raw workflow next week. And we're actually going to start going in and processing these files, talk about the raw processor, how to correct files, and the things that I look for when I'm processing out a raw file. So once again, if you haven't signed up for that class, go back to the H&H website, sign up for it, and that will, again, be next Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Central Time.